Hi, I'm Britt.
And my name is Alissa.
And this is SkeleTales.
And this is the podcast where we strive to answer the age-old question of, is my dead grandma watching me?
We do ask that question, but not tonight. Tonight, we have our wingback chairs, and we have our coffee cups, and we are doing a SkeleTalk with the multi-talented Nicole Riccardo. By day, Nicole is a digital course creator and president and founder of NR Media and a flutist. By night, though, she is a medium, empath, paranormal investigator, and co-host of the awesome podcast, The Real Ghosts of Podcast. Welcome, Nicole.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Ooh, we're excited too. So tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so our podcast, The Real Ghosts of, it's kind of a spoof on a TV show. You might have heard of it, The Real Housewives of, because we're kind of sassy, you know, Devin and I, we have a little bit of sass to us. So we thought that we'll just, put that in the title, let people know right off the bat what you're getting into. Like, we're spooky, but we also like to have fun with it. So the podcast, we have two different episode types. First, we have, of course, our investigative episodes where we go into locations. And when we do our investigations, they always take me in blind. So they generally will do some research ahead of time, kind of know what we're getting into. They do all the interviews, talking with people at the location, getting the stories, experiences, and then they bring me in and see what I pick up on. And hopefully it lines up with what they've found. And then we, of course, do an investigation portion as well. Yeah. And so that is our investigation portion. And then we also have wine and spirits episodes, which is just kind of the chit chat episodes. Have a glass of wine, come hang out with us. We interview people and get their spooky stories, haunted tales, share those with you with our reactions to them. So those are the more fun episodes. So yeah, we kind of have both ends of the spectrum there.
I love your podcast. It's
Thank
you guys do your legwork with the research so well. I feel like when you're investigating these places that I'm actually there with you guys, and it's immersive. I love it.
Yay, thank you. That really means a lot, because I mean, at least for me, one of the concerns is always like, we want to do super in-depth historical research. That's one of our big things, right? Is we take that very seriously and want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, telling the story correctly, accurately. But it's also like, okay, well, how do we balance like going super in-depth on all of this history and research and not like boring people to death? So thank you. That means a lot.
So I'm curious, how did you discover that you were a medium? And
well, I've had experiences pretty much my entire life, down to like waking up in the middle of the night and it looks like there's a person standing next to my bed, but you blink a few times and you're like, oh no, it's just my eyes playing tricks on me, right? Or doing tours of historic locations and being like, does somebody die in here? And every single time it's right. Like it literally has been a running joke in my family since I was a kid. Like, oh, you want to know if your place is haunted? Yeah, just take Nicole there. She'll tell you. You want to know if somebody died there? Just take Nicole. She'll tell you. But I think growing up experiencing all of these things, to me, it was just normal. Like I never really stopped to think like, oh, this doesn't happen to everyone. Not everybody wakes up seeing people standing next to their bed. Like this is not a normal in quotes, right? Thing that people experience. But to me, since it happened so often, it was. So I just never really thought much about it. But when I finally discovered, oh, I am actually a medium. It was during the pandemic, actually. I started going to therapy because I've always had really bad anxiety. And this is also something that generally a lot of mediums and people with abilities will experience, because you're picking up on everything. You're picking up on all of this energy. And for me, it was always specifically the worst when I'm in social situations, right? So like a concert where I'm surrounded by all of these people and all of this energy, or at an airport. Like I don't have any issue with flying. Like I'm fine with planes. But it's being at the airport and surrounded by all those people, and it just shoots my anxiety through the roof. So anyway, started going to therapy because my anxiety was just getting worse and worse and worse. Like I was honestly like hardly functioning. Like I could barely even go to the grocery store without just being like, I just cannot even handle this right now. And so we were doing EMDR therapy, which if anybody's not familiar with that, it's a therapy technique, and it kind of like puts your brain into like a stream of consciousness, almost like, you know, when you're falling before you fall asleep and your brain is thinking of like, oh my God, that awkward thing I said in that one conversation 10 years ago, right? And you're like, where the hell did that come from? So it kind of like forces your brain into something like that. And so we're doing this, trying to like help with my anxiety, get to cause, you know, what's happening with it. And this was our second session on it. And the entire session, everything that came up was like death related or related to experiences that I've had, like weird stuff like that, just, you know, a very consistent theme. And so we finish, and my therapist says, you know, actually it's pretty uncommon when you're doing EMDR to have such a consistent theme like that. Generally it's kind of all over the place, very random. So she starts asking me about these experiences, you know, how long have you been experiencing things like this? You know, what has it been like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually she goes, have you ever considered that you might have abilities? And I feel like it was that meme with, you know, all the like math flying behind your head and just like, oh no, but that would make my entire life make sense. And so I'm like driving home, and, you know, I feel like my freaking world is just like spinning around me. Everything just got like turned upside down. I'm like, oh shit, you know, and you're like putting all the pieces together. And like, I've been obsessed with paranormal stuff since I was a kid also. And so watching all of these ghost shows and seeing mediums and hearing like what they're talking about, like all, you know, all the pieces just start clicking in my brain. I'm like, oh my God, like this is it. Like this is it. Everything makes sense now. So yeah, that was kind of the moment for me where I was like, oh, okay. I guess I do.
I find it so interesting that a therapist is the one, like someone who's, you would imagine being so analytical and, you know, logic based, and, you know, was the one who suggested this and made you realize it. I call those, well, I didn't coin come to Jesus moments, but like where everything just like clicks, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, it crystallizes. Why haven't I not seen this before?
Yep. That's exactly what it was.
Oh my gosh.
And so that you're fairly new to this gift then, huh?
Yeah. It was, oh my God. Yeah. It's 2021. Yeah. It was last year. So it's only been a little over a year that I've actually been like actively working on this and practicing it. It's interesting because one of the things that Devin and I have talked about is, so I'm a flute player. And when I was in school, I did my bachelor's, master's at Florida State University. And when you're a music major, so I was a flute performance major, you have a one-on-one lesson with your private teacher every single week. So I was seeing her, you know, every single week, one-on-one. And then we have studio class together and blah, blah, blah. So around this one professor, you know, constantly. And she is someone who's very, I don't want to say into like metaphysical, although she probably is, but she's very into, you know, like, oh, we're going to do grounding and we're going to do this visualization. And she even had us doing like shadow work, although she would call it, you know, oh, let's hug your inner child and blah, 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 like doing all of this stuff that is like literally like stuff you do in mediumship training. And so now we joke like, oh, well, she was basically training me like to be a medium from the time I was a freshman in college. And so when I finally started doing the training for mediumship, a lot of those basics and the fundamentals and, you know, meditation, grounding, visualization, blah, 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 like I've been doing that for years and years and years already. And so then when I started doing the actual training and, you know, doing readings and doing locations and blah, 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 everything was just going like super fast. So, I mean, that's, you know, super beneficial for me because I tend to be very impatient, but yeah. It's just, it's just really interesting to me how everything kind of fits together. It's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense why I was so called to study with her now,
Yes. Well, it seems like you were called, for that, and then even your therapist too.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about medium training. Did you just Google how do I become how do I hone this gift?
I'm picturing Hogwarts. That's what I'm picturing, right?
Yes, I got my Hogwarts acceptance letter the next day and promptly packed my trunk. Yeah. So I in terms of the training, I am a very type A. I want to know everything there is to know about anything. And I'm ADHD, so I hyper fixate on things. And so when I figured this out, it was whoa, hyper fixation phase to the max. And so there was a lot of Googling. I'm a big book person. So I was, buying every and any book that I could possibly get a hold of for it. And I also ended up being really lucky because one of my family friends is a medium. And I know her because when I was in high school, I used to babysit her kid. And so I hadn't talked to her in quite a few years, but we ended up reconnecting over Instagram. And, I told her this, and this was I think maybe the next day after I found out from my therapist. And I was I need to talk to you about this. And she's someone who I really admire, trust, and literally everything that she has ever told me either came true or was true. So I'm okay, I need to talk to her, And so we ended up having it was a 4-hour FaceTime, and she's, walking me through the kind of foundation of okay, here's how we're gonna make sure you're protecting your energy, blah, 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 when you're picking up on things, how to know if it's yours or something else, and kind of the fundamentals and giving me some next steps for things. So that was really, really beneficial to have and be able to have somebody just kind of bring me back down to earth and be okay, these are some tangible steps for things that you should be doing. Because it can be information overload, you're Googling and you're YouTubing and you're podcasting and especially when it comes to this stuff, you guys know everybody's going to have different opinions and say different things and blah, blah, blah. It's not math. There's not an exact formula. It's who really knows at the end of the day, so did that. And then the first step for me was I started, of course, with the reading, researching, whatever. I started doing mediumship development circles, which is basically a training circle where a bunch of mediums, people who are in training, you get together in a group and everybody kind of you go around the circle and everybody takes turns reading and seeing what they can pick up on. And, people will be oh, I can understand that. And, you're getting feedback, and it's practice makes perfect, right? You're in a safe environment where everybody's practicing, everybody's learning, you can learn a lot and figuring out, how to pick up on things. And I always kind of describe it it's kind of playing a really bad game of Pictionary. So you're being shown things and you're trying to kind of figure out and, identify well, maybe it means this and maybe, it's a whole ordeal. But anyway, so doing the mediumship development circles, that really helped a lot. And then after that, I started doing working with a couple mentors individually, because that's the other thing with mediumship. Everybody picks up on things differently and everybody has different abilities, So some people may see things, right? Clairvoyance. Some people hear things. Some people just know things, right? And so everybody has different senses. Ideally, at least what I think is we want to develop all of these different senses and be able to use all of them. But there's a learning period, right? Of trying to develop the ones that you're a bit weaker on. And there's also, reading for people is very different than reading places and buildings and locations, And so, one of my mentors, actually, she does exactly what I have always been interested in doing, is reading haunted locations and doing that. And so, yeah, she's actually, I know we were talking about this earlier, Britt, she's the medium for the Night Owl podcast, Sarah. And so she's one of my mentors because she does, exactly what I also do. And so having somebody that is in that same space and, same abilities, doing the same thing is really, really helpful in getting that like hands-on training. And, she has a bunch of people that she mentors. And so having that community as well and being able to talk to other people. And yeah, there you go, mediumship training.
When you are going into a haunted space, how are spirits approaching you? Is it a feeling you're getting? Are you getting visualizations? Are you hearing things? Or is it sort of the whole gamut?
I mean, it's all of them for me, but I will say for my senses specifically, I generally will feel things first. So like if I walk into a place and it's haunted, I'm going to know pretty much immediately. And for me, I'll like feel it in my gut, and it almost like, it kind of feels like anxiety, and like if I walk into a place, I'm like, ooh, my anxiety is going through the roof right now. Like, oh, okay, well, it's probably haunted. So that's usually the first thing that I'll encounter. And then in terms of trying to interact with them, yeah, it's going to be clairvoyantly. So seeing them, and generally that will be the first way that they'll present, is I'll see them first. And then but then when it gets into, trying to have a conversation with them or ask them things, then I hear them. So it's like, every time I describe it, I literally feel like there's going to be some therapist out there that's like, put this girl on medicine, but it's like I see them in my head, and then we have a conversation in my head back and forth, I do also have the sense where, sometimes you just like know things. So sometimes that happens as well, where I'll just get like a download or whatever. I'm like, oh, this, happened. But generally for me, it's going to be seeing and hearing them, like talking to them.
Cool.
So you said when you were little, you walked into places and you would know that someone died or ask if someone died in those places. Is there ever a time in your life that you tried to hide this, like that it made you feel like an outsider because of this sense?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I feel like sometimes it still kind of does. Like this is not something that I will like openly talk about to just anyone, because there is a lot of judgment that comes with it. I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, right? Like the paranormal and doing this kind of stuff is already one of those things where people have such strong opinions on, right? Like, oh, there's no such thing, blah, blah, blah. Right. But then especially when you get into like, oh, I see dead people and I talk to dead people, of course there are so many people that are like, oh, all mediums are frauds and blah, blah, blah. So like even now going to like paranormal events, Taylor and I have gone to a few paranormal events now and being on investigations, and even like surrounded by people who love this stuff, I still have never necessarily said like, oh, I'm a medium, in case anybody wants to know what I see, because it's just like, I mean, they didn't like ask me, I'm not going to just like talk about it. Like everybody look at me,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I still feel like self-conscious about it, to be honest.
An interesting answer I've gotten sometimes has recently, like, hey, do you have any, because I'm always harvesting. I'm like, hey, do you have any ghost stories? Is, well, I am science-based. And I'm like, what? Like, you can't be both. Like, you
can't believe in science and also the paranormal.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because I think there's room for both, but I never expected that sort of answer to come.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things, I mean, me, Devin, Taylor, we've had this conversation so many times that with paranormal stuff, I feel like eventually science is going to catch up to it, but I think it's just not there yet. But that's also one of the reasons why, like with structuring our episodes and our investigations, there are a lot of groups, whatever, they'll just do, the research, then bring their medium in and great, done. Right. But that was why we wanted to incorporate doing an investigation part as well, because having that actual evidence of like, oh, we captured this EVP, or like, oh, we used an EMF and got these spikes here, right? Like getting that actual tangible evidence of things that are unexplainable, like having that scientific, if you will, component to it, I feel like just gives it another layer of, hey, this is like a bit harder for you to dispute now,
that transitions perfectly to my next question. So when you go on these paranormal investigations to these locations, what methods are you using? You mentioned the EVP and the EMF, and I think I know half of what those mean. But yeah, what techniques do you use? I have to say that I am especially curious about, did you say the Estes? Is that how you say it?
The Estes. The Estes method.
Estes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I had never heard of that before until listening to your moonshine episode, and it is fantastic. Okay, I'm just going to let you answer, but the different methods that you guys use.
Yeah. So we are definitely big on, we would prefer to debunk things first, right? Or have reasons for things. So the very first thing that we do after, I've done my walk when we're starting the investigation portion is we do an EMF sweep of the entire location just to make sure we're finding out like, oh, there's an electrical hotspot right here. Or like, oh, there's an electrical box here and it's shooting the EMF up, right? Like we want to know where those places are. So that way, if there were maybe any experiences in that specific location, or I picked up on something, a weird feeling, whatever, like we want to have a reasonable explanation for that. So we use the EMF as a baseline to know like where there are actual electrical spikes in the location. So that's the very first thing that we do, getting that baseline. Then for investigation techniques, yes, EVP, electronic voice phenomena. So obviously using our recorders, which unfortunately is not always possible in the investigations that we're doing. Like with moonshines, there's no way we would have been able to get any EVPs in that location, because even though we went after they closed, there were still people cleaning up. And like the last investigation that we did there, we were there until like, I think 4 a.m. and there were still people there, like cleaning, doing things. So there was just never a moment where it would have been quiet enough for us to get anything. Right. So other ways that we like doing things, our personal favorite one is the Estes method, as you brought up. So the Estes method is really cool. You take a spirit box, and we've used a spirit box before, just using the spirit box alone, right? Listening for things, whatever. But if you want to kick it up a couple notches, the Estes method. So the Estes method is where you have one person sit with the spirit box, but we do a sensory deprivation with it. So you put a blindfold on them, you put headphones on them, noise canceling headphones, and then we hook those headphones up to the spirit box. So they are sitting there in complete darkness. All they can hear is the spirit box. They can't hear anything we're asking them, anything like that. And so they're sitting there, listening to the spirit box. And then that leaves, like, let's say Devin is doing the spirit box listening. So then that would leave Taylor and we can ask questions, and then Devin can't hear anything. And the thing that I find so compelling with the Estes method is every single time we've ever done this, we end up getting intelligent responses back. And it's almost like you're having a conversation with this spirit entity, whatever. But it's just wild because like they're wearing noise canceling headphones, and we've done tests. Like every time we do it, we have them put it on and stand in different places. Okay. Can you hear me here? Can you hear me here? Making sure we get the like where we're standing set up so that way they can't hear anything. But it's just wild to be doing it and asking questions and getting intelligent responses back and just being in that moment and feeling like, oh, we're having like a freaking conversation with a spirit right now. Like in Moonshines, there was one part where we were down in the cellar and we were doing Estes, and you could hear somebody like walk across the floor, these like loud footsteps. And then they're like, too loud. It was so funny. So we'll get stuff like that, which is, it's just really interesting. So yeah, I still need to actually go through that footage because at Moonshine, we got a ton of really great Estes stuff. So I'm going to put all of those videos up on our Patreon. So if you're interested in seeing like a full Estes method, that'll all be up there. But yeah, it's really, really cool. So
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. What is a spirit box?
Ooh, a spirit box, the SB7 spirit box. So it's like a little device that flips through different radio frequencies really, really, really quickly. And it is thought, the theory behind it is for spirits to be able to come through, they're able to use that white noise, right? And form words. And so the really cool thing about it is as it's switching through these different radio stations, it's going so quickly that there's just no way that a word would be able to come through like, oh, from that radio station or whatever, because it's switching through so quickly. So when words do come through, they're coming through over the span of like multiple radio clips.
Does it just sound like white noise when you have the noise canceling headphones on?
Yeah, it's a lot of white noise and it is pretty loud. So like anybody that's ever watched, like if you watch Ghost Adventures or Kindred Spirits, they do the Estes method on there a lot. So if you've ever listened at or watched any of those shows, you'll hear it. It's like, I wish I could like imitate it, but it's pretty loud. And it also, I think with listening to the spirit box, you do have to have a pretty like attuned ear for it, because sometimes it can be really difficult to catch things. Sometimes it's super clear and it'll just be like a freaking word. Like we've gotten some before. We were sitting out in a cemetery actually, and we got one that came through that was very clear. Help me. And it came through like multiple times, the same voice. So when you start getting stuff like that, it's wild. So yeah, spirit box, 10 out of 10 would recommend. They're super fun.
Were you able to find out who that spirit was?
Yeah. So it's actually interesting because that one specifically, so it was over, what is it? The Baghdad cemetery over here in Leander. It's the cemetery that they filmed or some of the scenes from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at, actually.
Yeah.
Taylor and I went there, and we went there because we were going to test this spirit box. This was like,
nice.
It, and we had some different like setups, whatever. We have it hooked up to like speakers, blah, blah, blah. So we were going there to test it. And so when we were there, the first thing that I picked up on when we were there was this woman walking around. She was looking for her son, and she was like saying, oh, can you help me find my son? I'm trying to find him. Like, help me find him. Like, where is he? He's running around. And so then, whatever, later on, I end up seeing the son running around. But I mean, the sad thing is they were on, like, they couldn't see each other. They're on like different planes. So anyway, but yeah, that's who I think it was coming through on the box, because it was her voice too. And there were multiple occurrences of her saying, help me. And it was all in like the woman's voice, which is just really interesting when that happens. So,
oh my gosh, I've got so many questions now. But Britt had a question like that. It was, do you ever help guide the spirits like that are in need and that are seeking help?
That is something. So for us, before we even started investigating, we had a lot of conversations about like, how do we want to go about this? How do we want to be doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that's really, really important to us is the ethics of paranormal investigation. And we feel very strongly that we never want to go into a location and just gather evidence and leave, right? Like that is not our intention here. And my job as the medium is if there is someone that needs help like that, if I have the ability or capability to deal with it, like that is my job to do that, So that is one of the things for all of our investigations. We never just go there and collect evidence and dip, right? We are making sure that if there is a spirit there that wants to be moved on, doesn't want to be there anymore, we're taking the steps to help that spirit be able to move on, or, whatever needs to happen there. Yes, there's a whole like aftermath to us going. And this was actually the next investigation episode that we have that's going to come out. We went down to the Gunter Hotel in San Antonio. And the last time we went there, we actually ended up going down there with my mentor, Sarah, because one of the spirits, and I mean, you'll hear this in the episode, but basically there was a very gruesome, very famous murder that happened in one of the rooms there. And the woman that was murdered was stuck in that room. She was like being held there, tethered there by the murderer. And so when we were there, she just very clearly, like she did not want to be there. She was asking to leave, to move her on. But because of the murderer being there and the tether, whatever, it was not something that I had the ability to do on my own. So that's why I ended up going back down there with Sarah, and we were able to finally, help her be able to leave the location and move on. So yeah, that is something that we take very, very seriously about what we do. Is if there is anything that we need to do, that we need to help with, like, we're going to do that. We're not just going to come in and rile everything up and then leave.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Speaking of places you go, how do you guys pick the locations where you do your investigations?
Yeah, well, that is a Taylor and Devin thing. I mean, the first one, the Blockhouse Creek episode, we didn't really focus on my abilities for that one because I knew about it ahead of time. But the other ones, I mean, Taylor and Devin pretty much set up, and they just tell me when and where, like, when to be ready, and then they take me places. But we do fun. Yeah, I mean, it has been really interesting though, because a couple of them have kind of just fallen into our laps. Like when we are out places and people realize what we're doing, we end up having people come up to us and be like, oh my God, and here's this story. And yeah, I experienced this. And oh my God, have you checked out this place yet? Yeah, you need to go over there. Right. And so like our last investigation that we did, which I don't think we've talked about the location yet, but it's on 6th Street and it's a little like haunted speakeasy. We ended up finding that place because Taylor and I were having drinks at the Driscoll and like literally walked down the street and we're like, oh, we heard some things about this place. And like literally within 10 minutes, we had like the manager there giving us an interview and they're setting up an investigation. So yeah, it's sometimes things just kind of happen like that.
Fall in your lap. That's so cool. Well, so like, what would your dream place be to investigate? Do you have like in your mind, like, oh, I really want to go there and check it out?
I mean, I have a dream place in Austin. Like I want to go investigate ASH, the old Austin State Hospital. Ooh, that would be so much fun. But yeah, I love the like old spooky abandoned places, if it's like falling down and dilapidated and like something that looks like it would be the scene of a horror movie. Like I want to go, let me in there. I love it already. So I mean, pretty much anywhere like that, but I don't know that I have one big one. I just want to go everywhere,
Yeah.
The episode that I listened to, you mentioned that it was it Moonshine? Is that the name of the place? The Moonshine. That spirits that were there are unable to interact with like the present. They're kind of just going about their business. Then there are active spirits that are more aware of what's going on. In your opinion, what is the difference between those spirits?
Yeah. So the residual versus intelligent. So yes. Residual spirits, it's kind of like an energy imprint, if you will. Here's a really good example of this. You'll experience these a lot in cemeteries. So let's say I go to a cemetery and there's, I don't know, this guy that passed away and his wife came there every single day for however many years, grieving and, visiting his headstone. That's going to leave an energy imprint, right? And I'm sure we've probably all experienced this when you, let's say you walk into a room after somebody had a big argument, right? And you can feel it. You feel that tension. You're like, oh, it feels like I'm not supposed to be here right now. That's that residual energy. And so like in the instance of the cemetery, right? If she's coming every single day and grieving and mourning and sad, like if you're somebody who's sensitive to energies, when you're walking through a cemetery, if you're walking past the headstones, you're going to walk past them and you will feel that. You are going to feel that like residual energy imprint. But the interesting thing with these is it can get more complex than just, okay, the energy of like, oh, I feel that energy, right? I feel that energy of like that sadness, that grieving, right? And somewhere like Moonshines, which is built of this stone, right? I think it's limestone actually. For anybody that's gone down the rabbit hole on the stone tape theory, right? There are these like materials that supposedly will kind of record information and events and basically replay it. And so like there's some of that moonshines with, you know, these scenes basically replaying themselves. And so as a medium, I can like see it in my head of like, oh, this is replaying. Or like for instance, okay, with the moonshines episode with the accident on the corner of 3rd and Red River with the little boy being hit by the car. Like I could see that in my head. It wasn't, you know, if I had gone up there, it's not like the little boy's going to stop and wave at me or interact. Like it's literally just kind of a replay, like a recording replay. And it literally repeats as well. Like it'll, you know, you see the scene and it happens and then there's like an end point and then it starts back over. It's like a loop because it's just replaying the energy, that traumatic event, right? So that's a residual. It's just an imprint, just replaying itself. You can't really interact with it. It can't do anything different. It's stuck in this little like cycle. It's not conscious, if you will. But intelligent spirits, entities, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. I know some people like differentiate between them, but I think they're all kind of the same. But anyway, intelligent ones, those are the ones that you can actually interact with, right? So I could like go up to that spirit and be able to have a conversation with them, ask them questions. I'll be able to like watch them move around and go, you know, those are the ones that are like, they can come tap you on the shoulder, or you might get an EVP from them. Or if we're doing like a spirit box session, Estes method, those are the ones that are going to be coming through because they do have that intelligence, right? Intelligent entity where they can interact.
So the residual ones, they're not necessarily stuck there. It's not that they haven't moved on. It's more like I'm not stuck in a photograph of myself taken 10 years ago. It's just an image of me.
Exactly.
So if you do know of something like that, it's not necessarily sad. It was a sad event, but that's not meaning that the spirit is actually stuck in that loop for eternity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nicole, did you end up releasing the little boy spirit who was hit by the vehicle? In Moonshines?
He is still there. He is not aware of his death. And that will happen sometimes with spirits that had a traumatic death. But he was not a spirit that was like, I'm unhappy to be here. I don't want to be here. He's just like running around, having fun, chilling, you know?
Yeah.
So there was nothing negative or bad or, you know, any sort of distress or anything going on with him that would make me be like, oh, we need to, you know, forcibly move him on. Right. So generally the only times that I'll do that is if a spirit like straight up asks, like, I don't want to be here. I want to leave. Right. That's generally the only time that I'm going to move them on.
Okay. Now, a few times I've heard you mention in episodes where you talk about a spirit guide or your spirit guide.
Yes.
Do you have multiple spirit guides? And then how would somebody discover if they also have a spirit guide? I want one.
Good question. So everybody has spirit guides. And yes, there are multiple. I have 7 currently. And usually everybody's going to have your like main guide, your guide that has been with you your entire life, will be with you forever. But the rest of the guides, they can switch out sometimes. Like it's kind of like teachers, you know, they'll be with you for like, oh, this period of time. And then like, oh, she like discovered she's a medium. Okay, like switch out. We need some people who are going to help her like learn how to be a medium, you know? So they can kind of switch out aside from your primary guide. But for meeting them, it's going to be meditation and visualization. So first of all, if you're not a person that meditates regularly, I mean, I would encourage you to start meditating regularly anyway, because it's, you know, good for you, good for your brain. We love meditation. But for meeting them, there are like a ton of YouTube videos, honestly, that will guide you through these like guided visualization meditations for meeting them. And then this is, I think, the most difficult aspect of this. And especially like, I mean, even being someone who like, I know I'm a medium, I've done things, I've had things I say validated. It's still like you're going to feel like you're crazy if you're not somebody who does this on a regular basis, because you're going to see something pop into your head. Usually, you know, it'll be like an image of them, whatever. And just like trusting. You have to trust yourself though, and be like, oh, I'm not a crazy person. Like this is what I'm actually seeing and feeling. Yeah. It's because it's generally, it's not like, you know, the Sixth Sense where it looks like there's a full, like, you know, person standing in front of you that you can touch, like you're seeing it in your head, you know? So just know that it is not like the movies, just trust what you're seeing. But yeah, YouTube videos for guided visualizations for meeting them. Or, I mean, if you're just like really interested in that and you're having a really hard time doing it, which by the way, for a lot of people, even mediums, sometimes it can take like many times of doing these visualizations to try to meet their guide. So if you don't get it on the first time, that's normal. That's okay. But let's say, I don't know, you've been working on it for like months and still having issues. And you're like, oh, I just really want to meet my spirit guides. You can also set up sessions with like mediums, or there are, you know, people who can help guide you through it, or, you know, mentors, shamans, whatever, where you can set up a session and just be like, hey, like, I want to know who my spirit guides are. And then they can tell you who they are. And I also, with mine, they're your people, you know, they're there like watching you, trying to help you make not shitty decisions with your life. Right. So when I first met mine, I also asked them, like if there was anything that I could do to help honor them, or, you know, show like, hey, like I want to, you know, give thanks to you, whatever. So they can, I would also say, have them ask them that too, or you can, if you're meeting them yourselves. Like for mine, like my primary guide, she said turquoise. She wanted me to have something turquoise. And so I have this turquoise ring, which I had just gotten like a couple months before. And the funny thing about this is I had been looking for a turquoise ring that I liked for probably about 5 or 6 years, to be honest with you. And I just had never found one that really, you know, like felt good. That was like, yeah, that's the one. And then like literally a couple months before, I had found this turquoise ring, I got it. And then when I finally, you know, was like, oh, I'm a medium, let's meet my spirit guides, going through all of this. And then she said that, I was just like,
she's been in your head that whole time. She's like, we have to find my ring.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just another one of those like full circle moments, you know, like, oh, this all makes sense now.
When you realized who your spirit guides were, had you already known them or seen them or visualized them before? And then you're like, oh, I didn't realize who you were, but like it was a recognition, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, for one of them, yes. Yeah, I had definitely, like, I've seen him in dreams before, or just gotten flashes, or and another thing with it is like feeling the energy, because just like every individual person has different energy, right? Like all my guides have different energies. And so I can even just like sense, you know, who's trying to communicate by like the energy. And so his energy, I was like, oh, okay, that's what this is. So yeah, there was definitely that.
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting.
I had a thought. So Alissa and I are really fascinated with near-death experiences. And we told a story recently about a fella who died. And in this like near-death experience, because he ended up coming back to life, but like in this like middle ground of like just having died, his grandfather was there. And his grandfather like took on the appearance of being old, but then turned young. Like, was that grandfather his spirit guide? Or is that, in your opinion, obviously, like there's no like textbook for this, but like, are deceased relatives typically spirit guides, do you think?
In that instance, I mean, obviously I'm not him, I don't know, but it was probably just an instance of like the ancestors, his whatever family members being there to greet him when they pass. That's very common. That when we pass, our loved ones, like the people that we knew in life that really meant a lot to us, they're generally going to be there for us to help us in that transition. In terms of being spirit guides, it's like, I do have some of my like family members who have passed, like my grandmother, she'll be around like hanging out sometimes, but they're generally not going to be one of your guides per se. Like they'll still be there to, help. You can communicate with them, but usually you will have some sort of like ancestor guide though, but they're generally going to be like somebody that you wouldn't have known, from like many generations back, something like that, because they've, been on the other side for a while. And there is a learning period, right? You're not just going to die and be like, oh, great. Like, how do I communicate?
I'm a guide.
With you, yeah. Like there's like a training period. And so this is also why, like, when people pass, like, if you reach out to a medium right away, like we're not always going to be able to communicate with them right away, because there's kind of, they kind of have to like make that transition and blah, blah, blah. So a spirit guide is generally going to be an ancestor, but it would be somebody that you probably would not have known.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Alissa, do you have any other questions, or should I ask our final question?
I guess where do these spirits go after they die? That's my question. What is your theory on it? Like if some are stuck, or if people can't, if they contact you, say, hey, I want to contact my dead relative, and you're unable to, like if the person is stuck in a hotel room being held hostage, would you be able to contact them in another state or something? And that's, again, your thoughts on that. These are hard questions. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this one, I think there's a lot of answers here. I will say, at least from what I've experienced and from other mediums that I've spoken to, have worked with, there isn't really, like, time is not linear on the other side. And so you, like, being in multiple places at once is a thing, which I feel like for our brains, it's still, like, even just talking about is like, okay, wait, like, how does that work? Because our logical brain kicks in and we're like, oh, trying to like figure it out. But time is not linear on the other side. And so there's, like, there have been occurrences where, okay, let's say I'm trying to, ask my grandma a question who has passed. Maybe she's, not like chilling in my house, like sitting on my chair over here, waiting, like, oh, Nicole might like have a question for me today, but it's kind of like putting that intention out there, and I can still like receive information or messages from her, even if she's not necessarily like here in my house, as a spirit. Like sometimes she is, but it's more rare. So you can still, like, there are still ways to communicate without this like spirit, if you will, necessarily needing to be there. But yeah, in terms of where they go, there's obviously like, hauntings, right? Some people will get like attached to one place, but generally if that happens, there's a reason for it. Like there was, maybe they're attached to that land and they have some sort of like protection duties, right? So like with the Blockhouse Creek episode with Top Hat Man, Andy Mather, like that's what he's doing here. That is his purpose. He's doing some sort of protection, right? Like kind of keeping the balance in this area. But maybe there's like the little boy at Moonshines, he had a traumatic death there and he does not realize he's dead. And so he's just like hanging out, being a kid running around. So there's that. Or then there's like at the Gunter Hotel, the woman who was murdered in that room, she was being kept there against her will, right? She was like literally like tethered there, being kept there by the guy that murdered her because his spirit was there too. But that was like, for him, like that was a choice. For him, like he was afraid of what's on the other side. He's afraid of like crossing over, going fully in, because he doesn't know where he's going to go. And it's, might not be something good. And he's afraid of that. So he's choosing to stay on this plane, on our realm, right? Because he would rather just stay here and hang out than go into an unknown. And yeah, the unknown, going on into the other side. That's where the unknown is. We can hypothesize and speculate, but I think there are various places that you can go, like realms, planes, if you will. I don't necessarily know what they are or what they're like. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out when we get there.
This has been truly, truly informative and fascinating for me. I'm so into all of this.
Yeah. I'm like, I have to hold my questions. I'm like, I have, just because I feel like you have a peek inside, like the secret, you've got a little bit of the like cheat sheet of like life there that I'm like, tell me what you think.
All right. Buckle up. We're in for a 3-hour episode. Here we go. Next question.
Hold on. I need another cup of coffee.
Yeah, right. I know.
All right. So, Nicole, we ask a final question when we do our SkeleTalks, and it is, what 3 objects would we need to bring to a seance to summon you from the afterlife?
Okay. Yes. So first is, I know I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a big book person.
Mm-hmm.
So a book and or bonus points if it's a stack of books on anything like witchy, spooky, mystical, magical, paranormal. Also bonus points if they're like really old. Love an old book. So yeah, books. Red lipstick. Specifically the Fenty Beauty liquid lip in uncensored. That would be my pick. And the final item, probably my glasses, honestly, because they're like, they're like part of my look. They're like a signature. I like legitimately, I think I'm just going to buy like 10 pairs of them just so that way, whenever anything inevitably happens to this pair, like I can just never not have a pair of these. So,
Nice.
Yeah, my glasses.
This might be the easiest seance that we've had to like put together, right? Like a stack of old witchy books.
Yeah.
Red lipstick and your glasses. I imagine them all like perched on top of the witchy books.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, surely we'll have some candles too, because
definitely candles. Needs to be done under the moonlight, right?
Okay,
like,
of course.
Witchy and spooky. Yeah, crystals. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we always bring the crystals.
Very sensible. But then I can picture you showing up, you grab that lipstick, your lipstick looks very nice, by the way.
Thank you.
Apply the lipstick, you put on your glasses so you can see everyone, and then you just tuck into a book and ignore everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a possibility.
I love it. So if anybody would like to listen to your podcast or find out more about the Real Ghosts of, tell us how they can discover you.
Yeah. So first you can follow us on Instagram at The Real Ghosts of. And for listening, I mean, you can find us pretty much wherever you might listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all that jazz. And if you like spooky TikToks, you can follow me on TikTok, Nicole Riccardo. I've been posting them on there. So yeah.
Well, Alyssa's seasoned with TikTok, but I'm fairly new to it, so I'm really excited that you're on TikTok too.
Yes, spooky TikToks. I have like honestly probably close to 100 little like video clips on my phone because I've been traveling a lot recently. I was up in Salem and Boston, over in St. Augustine, doing like spooky things. I have like so much video I just need to actually like put it on TikTok. So yeah, spooky content coming soon. Well, I mean, there is some up there, but more coming soon.
I love Salem. Did you want to move to Salem after visiting there? Like, I was like, I could live here. I love that town.
Yeah, literally the very first time that I went was on my 30th birthday, actually. And we were walking around for like 10 minutes and I was like, I'm home. I'm moving here.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. Okay, yeah. So everyone go check out The Real Ghosts of. And thank you again so much, Nicole, for making the time to talk with us. It was an absolute delight, and haunt you later.
Haunt y'all later.